I'll give the Seattle Seahawks this. This is an organization for quite a while was relatively irrelevant. They really were. Like, they mattered so little that when you had that last bit of realignment about 20 years ago, the AFC said, nah, we're good. Go ahead and let them go to the NFC. Just think about that. But over the past decade, the Seahawks have been relevant. They've had times when they've absolutely been a championship contender. They made it to back-to-back Super Bowls in the 2013 and 2014 seasons. They've won a Super Bowl. They have a quarterback who is one of the steals of the past decade in the draft. If you think about Russell Wilson being a third-round pick, don't shoot the messenger here, but you're thinking like Joe Montana level steal. Again, similar. Third-round pick, productive college player, undervalued because of size, etc. Now, Russell Wilson's not quite at the level of Joe Montana, but hopefully you get the comparison of what I'm getting at. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, because as much as you can praise the Seahawks for taking Russell Wilson in the third round, that still means they didn't think he would be this good, and they passed on him twice to take Bruce Irvin and Robert Wagner, respectively. Bobby Wagner. But, you look at it and you start to wonder, okay, times have changed with Seattle, and they find ways to hang around. They find ways to compete. There's no question that they're still a well-coached team, but the identity of this team has shifted over the past 2 years to be about the Legion of Boom secondary and that great defense to being Russell Wilson's show and being about the offense. And, you've had kind of some mixed results there. Like, it was a natural inevitability that you've got Russell Wilson. You have to transform your team and your mold to fit it around him. Never knock him for that. Some of the execution of how that's been done and how that's kind of forsaken the defense to a certain degree, and where this team is at, you're almost at that point where the Seahawks missed out on the opportunity. But they've had the franchise quarterback for almost a decade now. But what's the point? What all good has it done? I mean, really. And then you get to this offseason and you have the whole saga around Russell Wilson and whether he's asked for a trade, whether he's about to be traded, whether the Bears or other teams have a trade in place. Not ideal. Not ideal. And even when you look back again on the whole Russell Wilson thing, the list of teams that was named just really didn't make any sense. So random too. The Raiders maybe make sense, but why would you want to work with John Gruden? Honestly. The Cowboys? Really? The Saints? You want to follow up in Drew Brees' shadow or something? The Bears? Oh my God, are you kidding me? More of other factors were at play than just the play on the field. Just saying. And it was interesting to see how this dynamic kind of played out as to whether or not Russell Wilson was going to be able to obtain more power within the Seahawks organization or over his own career and say, no, I don't want to be here anymore, I want to go elsewhere, or if the Seahawks were going to be able to keep him or, make shit work. And at the end of the day, we found out Russell Wilson's still in Seattle in 2021. I'm sure a lot of Seahawks fans, I would assume, are probably pretty happy about that. Because you don't just find franchise quarterbacks every day. You don't just get Hall of Fame quarterbacks to walk through the door all the time. So you got to appreciate what you got when you got it, because you never know when it's gone, when you'll ever have that feeling or experience again. This was a team that didn't have a ton of turnover on the roster in the offseason. I mean, they did lose guys like Shaq Griffin and Jerron Reed. For a defense that wasn't good last year, to lose two kind of key cogs certainly wasn't ideal, but it feels like in some ways they went a lower, cheaper route, trying to trust their coaching, their system, their development, bringing in guys like Kerry Hyder and specifically Akila Witherspoon, trying to have confidence in what they do. And sometimes you have to do that, and sometimes you have to roll the dice, and sometimes it's going to pay off well, and sometimes it just isn't. As is usually the case, this team did not have a lot of draft pick capital. They drafted D. Eskridge in the second round. Trey Brown, I think, was a round 5 pick. Now, you expect both of these guys, to contribute as rookies, but that's very few picks for a team that was pretty close against the salary cap with some clear holes on both sides of the ball, specifically the defense. Less than ideal. But then again, if you're talking about the Seattle Seahawks, you say, hey, they did invest the first round pick in this year's draft and next year's draft into that Jamal Adams trade. Okay. You did it for an in-the-box safety. Was that really wise or not? I don't know. I know. The answer is no. But then you say, well, otherwise, the alternative is the Seahawks would have kept those picks, and they largely likely fucked them up anyways. And the recent history indicates you're right. At least when they traded him for Jamal Adams, they got somebody that could actually contribute. So that's something. And when I look at this team, again, I see a team that's a viable playoff team, is a team you can't sleep on, is a team you always got to take serious. But just lacking that like championship ingredient, that championship level of talent. You've got Russell Wilson. You know, we'll see how much Russ cooks this year. Maybe this year is the year he'll finally get an MVP vote where he'll actually play well enough consistently throughout the whole season to get so. You've got a great 1-2 combination on the outside at wide receiver in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Still think it's crazy to me that that's Terrence Metcalf's son. Insane. Terrence Metcalf was a roly-poly offensive guard who didn't pan out very well for the Chicago Bears, former third-round pick. DK Metcalf is cut out of fucking granite. And then their running game. You know, like, you've got Chris Carson hopefully coming back healthy. Rashad Penny, if you can get anything out of him. And then Russell Wilson, obviously, is a contributor to the running game. So this is a team that should still be able to run the ball very well with an explosive, high-powered passing attack that can hit you up for some big plays down the field. But the questions abound, is to me, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Where's the pass rush going to come from? The pass defense, is their secondary going to be vulnerable, get eaten up alive? And then, like, bigger question, just to me, overall, like, I've talked about it for a few years now about how this team just, like, consistently doesn't get it right in the draft. They really don't. It does speak to a little bit of, like, how much having a quality coach, Pete Carroll is absolutely a quality coach, how much having a franchise-level, elite-level quarterback like a Russell Wilson, which is what he exactly is. He's a franchise guy, elite-level, even though sometimes he has those moments. He looks like one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. He has those moments, and then he does these magnificent, spectacular things. Those things can mask those deficiencies for a while, but at some point in time, these draft failures are going to catch up with this team. The lack of draft pick capital is going to catch up with this team. I wonder if we started to see that a little bit last year, and I wonder if we're going to see a little bit more of that this year, because you can only overcome but so much of those problems. For this team, if I was looking at the schedule, I look at the first half of the year as an indication of how well this team may or may not position themselves, especially if you're talking about being in competition with the Rams for the best team in the NFC West. First 2 weeks of the season, they've got 2 games against playoff teams from the AFC South last year. They got to go to Indianapolis in week 1 and host Tennessee in week 2. And then you look at weeks 5 through 7, you've got the Rams at home, and then you've got Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, then you got to host New Orleans. So you want to make some hay there, even though 4 of those games certainly aren't going to be pushovers. I don't see where this team got any better. I don't necessarily think they got worse, but I don't see where they got any better. Like, really? You know? It's going to be a typical Seahawks team, I feel like, this year. They'll have a couple of really mind-numbingly bad, crappy performances. Then you'll have some games where they look like absolute world beaters, and then you have the rest. And they're going to finish somewhere winning double-digit wins, getting into the playoffs, probably making it somewhat competitive, you would think, potentially with the Rams, but falling short, then getting into the playoffs, and maybe they can win one game, but then they're quickly disposed of, and we don't really think about them, and we're back to the saga of Russell Wilson and whether or not he's going to be traded next year. Well, the Seahawks better make sure either way, you know, that they do what they can this year, because next year is not promised to anyone. I think the Seahawks, as I look at them, certainly you could argue, and I would say, they have arguably the best, most accomplished head coach in the division. That feels like a safe, true statement. Sean McVay might be the better commodity in terms of youth, like you like his youth and everything else and how much the media loves him. But in terms of like actual accomplishments, resume, it's Pete Carroll, period. The Seahawks also have the best quarterback in the division, and that's Russell Wilson. So those are things that lead me to believe that, hey, you know, they might be able to overtake the Rams, until I realize that the Rams have by far the best defense, and they did make an upgrade at quarterback with Matthew Stafford. So I don't think they're catching them. But this is also a team that is hard to dismiss because of the fact that they have an experienced, successful head coach with championship experience that knows what he's doing in Pete Carroll. And then you have a guy like Russell Wilson, a guy who can put his organization on his back and lead them to the promised land. He's done it before. maybe not to put him fully on his back part, but he's won a Super Bowl. He's played in a lot of big games and had some great performances. Like, you don't ever want to fully discount this team, but I certainly don't think they're the best team in this division. That's why I have them finishing second.